Okay, so as you know, for the past few weeks, we've been doing Pru Urvu, and Baruch Hashem, we at least initially finished that Miksoa. Then we did Hanukkah for 2 weeks, and although there's much more to say about Hanukkah, but since Hanukkah is now past, I'll leave that maybe for next year. So what I want to talk about today is Asarah B'Teves. But again, because this is a halachic shir, and I often say this is not you're not here for inspiration. Those who want inspiration, maybe can go to my Tuesday night shir or the many other good shiurim that are given here. We basically focus on analytical halacha. So I do want to speak about a very, very interesting aspect of Asarah B'Teves that makes it very unique. We know that in the Jewish calendar there are 4 fast days during the year that are connected to the Churban Beis Hamikdash. And I'm going to mention them in the chronological order of their occurrence, even though they're different parts of the calendar. Uh, Asarah B'Teves is the first event connected to the Churban Beis Hamikdash, because on the 10th of Teves is when Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians began a siege against Jerusalem that culminated 3 years later on the 9th of Av with the Churban Beis Hamikdash. So this is the earliest stage, the siege around Jerusalem in the Bayit Rishon. Now let me point out that as far as I know, Asarah B'Teves has no corresponding event for the Churban Bayit Sheni, meaning Asarah B'Teves is only the Bayit Rishon, unlike the 9th of Av. Now, the second event is the fast of the 17th of Tammuz. Now, here it actually is a bit complicated because one of the reasons why we fast on the 17th of Tammuz was at the end of the siege, the enemy broke into the city and got control of the city. However, the Gemara in Titus explains that the 17th of Tammuz is when the Romans broke into Jerusalem at the time of the Churban Bayit Sheni. During the Churban Bayit Rishon, the Navi Yirmiyahu says it was the 9th of Tammuz. So in reality, we ought to have a fast both on the 9th of Tammuz and on the 17th. But the Gemara says Chazal didn't want to make too many fast days that are close together, although we do have some Gedalah and Yom Kippur. Yeah, that's true. But they didn't want to do this. And therefore, as a result, we only commemorate the second Churban. So Asarah B'Teves is the beginning of the siege for the Churban Bayit Rishon. Shiva Asar B'Tammuz is Hufka Ha'ir. The city was broken into. The Churban Bayit Sheni, for the Churban Bayit Rishon, it was the 9th of Tammuz. Then, of course, we have Tisha B'Av, which is the anniversary of both the Churban Bayit Rishon and the Churban Bayit Sheni, which were exactly 490 years apart, meaning from the first Churban to the second Churban is 490 years, because there was the 70 years of the Babylonian exile, and then 420 years of the Bayit Sheni. And the last of the Beis Hamikdash fast days is the fast of Galia, which once again is only connected to the Bayit Rishon and not to the Bayit Sheni, that after the Churban and after the exile, a small number of Jews were permitted to remain in Eretz Israel under the leadership of Galia ben Achikam. And for many Jews, this was a glimmer of hope that perhaps Hashem will allow the Beis Hamikdash to be rebuilt very soon. And when Gedalia was assassinated, that was the nail in the coffin, meaning how many months? There was only, well, the Churban was Tisha B'Av. Gedalia was assassinated, actually, according to most Shitos, on Rosh Hashanah, following that Tisha B'Av. So it was less than 2 months later. And the reason we fast on the 3rd of Tishrei is simply because you're not allowed to fast on Rosh Hashanah, but technically Gedalia ben Achikam was killed on Rosh Hashanah itself, and 2 months after the Churban. But once again, just like Asarah B'Teves has nothing that corresponds to the Bayit Sheni, Tzom Gedalia also has nothing connected to the Bayit Sheni. So Tisha B'Av, of course, is both Bayit Rishon, Bayit Sheni. Tevet Tammuz is technically Bayit Sheni, but we also think about Bayit Rishon, which was the 9th of Tammuz, but the first of the fast days, the 10th of Tevet, and the last of the fast days are only connected to Bayit Rishon, not Bayit Sheni. Now, Asarah B'Tevet is the most unusual of all of our Tanesim, and in fact, we're going to experience it this year because it is the only fast day in which we actually fast on Friday. We know, of course, that we don't fast on Shabbos, even for Tisha B'Av, only for Yom Kippur, which is a Doraisa. But normally, the Jewish calendar is such that the other fast days never fall out on Friday. Asarah B'Tevet is the only one that we actually fast on Friday, which is very unusual. There's another peculiarity of Asarah B'Tevet, which is based on the civil calendar. It is the only fast day where you could have two of them in a single civil year, meaning to say, because of the leap years and the like, you could have, let's say, Asarah B'Tevet in one year, early in January, like this year, and next year it might be in late December. So as a result, in a single calendar year, is that the case this year? Asarah B'Tevet for 2025 is okay. So you can actually have a January, December. So it's the only Jewish holiday where you can have two of them in a single secular year. But again, that's not important halachically, but that's an interesting curiosity. But in terms of fasting on Erev Shabbos, it's an interesting thing because normally, the same way you're not supposed to fast on Shabbos, there actually is a halacha you're not supposed to fast on Erev Shabbos. And the reason is because we don't want you to enter Shabbos in a state of starvation or feeling deprived, because that itself takes away from the Oneg Shabbat that you begin Shabbos in a state of deprivation. It is true that there are halachas you're not supposed to eat a lot on Friday. That happens to be true also. So you should enter Shabbos having a good appetite, but it's also true that you don't enter Shabbos in a state of deprivation and fasting. Exception is Asarah B'Tevet. Now, all of this is well known, and indeed this year we're going to experience it. But there's a remarkable chiddush from Rav David Avudraham. The Avudraham lived in Spain in the 1400s, was one of the great early Achronim, or maybe late Rishonim, depends how you classify him, who wrote much on tefillah and the like. The Sefer Avudraham is still a very masterful collection of both Perushim and Halachos on tefillah, on the Jewish calendar, all sorts of aspects on when do you join parshios together, when do you separate them, all of those details of the liturgy. And the Avudraham is brought in all halachic sources. And the Avudraham says the following chiddush. Not only do you fast on Friday, but if the 10th of Teves would fall out on Shabbos, if it would fall out on Shabbos, you would even fast on Shabbos. Now, this is, as they say, an untestable proposition. And the reason it's an untestable proposition is that based on the Jewish calendar and the days that Rosh Hashanah can fall out. Remember, Rosh Hashanah, the first day of Rosh Hashanah can never fall out on a Sunday, on a Wednesday, or a Friday. That's called Lo Adu, Aleph Dal. Now, based on that, that's going to affect automatically when any of the other holidays could fall. Because once Rosh Hashanah cannot fall out on 3 days of the week, and then you look at the lengths of the months, that's automatically going to affect every other Yom Tov as well. And it happens to be Asarah B'Teves can never fall out on Shabbos. So as a result, the Avudraham is making what you might call an untestable hypothesis. And he's saying, okay, it can't fall out on Shabbos, but if it could, you would even fast. Why is that so? So he derives this from a verse in the Navi Yecheskel. Now remember, Yecheskel HaNavi lived at the same time as Yirmiyahu HaNavi, the time of the Chorban Beis HaMikdash. But remember, that Yirmiyahu Navi was in Eretz Yisrael, and he was, of course, an eyewitness to the Churban. Megillat Eicha. Yechezkel had been exiled to Bavel 11 years earlier. There was an earlier wave of exile. So Yechezkel was in Bavel at the time. So Hashem told him in Bavel, when Nebuchadnezzar began the siege on the 10th of Teves in Eretz Yisrael, he told him prophetically, and the Jewish people in Bavel were not aware of this yet. Kisov etzem hayom hazeh. Write down this very day, Melech Bavel is beginning his siege against Yerushalayim. So the Abu Dram argues that since Asarah B'Teves is described with the appellation Bi'etzem Hayom Hazeh, on that very day, we actually derive that that day is inviolate. That day must be observed no matter what. That day must be observed as a Tanit, even if it would fall out on Shabbos, which makes it the same as Yom Kippur. Now, initially, this is a little bit peculiar because there's no question whatsoever that the fast of Tisha B'Av is much, much stricter than the fast of Asarah B'Teves. If, for example, you're not feeling well, you have an upset stomach, you have a very serious headache, I'm not giving you a blanket hatcher, but there may be a lot of leniency to permit you to break the Asarah B'Teves fast. For the 9th of Av, it would have to be much more serious. So in terms of which is a more chamor fast, there is no question that the 9th of Av is much more chamor than the 10th of Teves. And yet, if the 9th of Av falls out on Shabbos, we push it off to Sunday. We don't fast on Shabbos. Only Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, of course, is different. That's a TORAH requirement. So why would Asarah B'Teves be so severe that it could override even the Shabbos? Masha'en Kain, Tisha B'Av itself does not override Shabbos, even though Tisha B'Av is halachically a much more stricter fast. So there's a very interesting explanation from Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, Rav Chaim Brisker. And Rav Chaim Brisker says the following idea. He says, normally we should actually fast anytime a fast happens on Shabbos because it's a mitzvah. In other words, even though Shabbos is Shabbos, if there's a mitzvah to fast, we should fast like Yom Kippur. He says the reason we don't is precisely because there's a makeup possibility, meaning it's a little different than the way we look at it. The normal way we look at it is like this. We say, oh, you're not allowed to fast on Shabbos, therefore you have to make it up the next day. Rav Chaim says he reverses the cause and effect. Since you have a makeup, then don't fast on Shabbos because you don't have to, because this is a makeup fast. So, says Rav Chaim, since the words be etzem hayom hazeh connote that this is not a makeup fast, it must be on this day. So if I were not to fast on Shabbos, I wouldn't do it at all. Memela, you fast on Shabbos. And you see Rav Chaim's Chiddush. Rav Chaim's Chiddush is that you have to ask yourself, if I don't fast today, could I fast tomorrow? If I could fast tomorrow, then I shouldn't fast on Shabbos. But if I can't fast tomorrow, so if I don't fast on Shabbos, I'm not going to have the fast at all. In such a situation, it's Docha even Shabbos. And therefore, B'etzem hayom hazeh teaches us, again, this doesn't yet give a reason, but B'etzem hayom hazeh teaches us that the 10th of Teves is not a make-up fast. It's not a makeable replacement. Therefore, if you wouldn't fast on Shabbos, you would lose the mitzvah legamrei. So in order not to lose the mitzvah legamrei, we allow you to fast on Shabbos. Masha'en came the 9th of Av, where the words B'etzem hayom hazeh are not used, and therefore you can make it up the next day. So we don't, Yom Kippur is different, but we don't fast on the 9th of Av because you can make it up. Meaning you don't, instead of saying, I don't fast and therefore I will make it up, you got to work the other way around. If I can make it up, then I don't fast. And that which I cannot make up, so if I don't fast on Shabbos, I'm not going to do it at all, I fast on Shabbos. This is Rav Chaim's Chiddush, that it is mutter to fast on Shabbos if it is a fast day that does not have tashlumin. That means a fast day that cannot be made up. So if I don't do it today, I will not be able to do it later. Such a fast day even overrides Shabbos. And the only fast day that does not override Shabbos is a fast day which does not override Shabbos if you are not able to make it up, right? So if I'm not able to make it up, it overrides Shabbos. If I can make it up, then it does not override Shabbos. Yeah.
Given the fact that it has to do with the seriousness of the day, why isn't it seen that Tisha B'Av is more serious, and the Etzem Hayom should have been written for Tisha B'Av?
Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, okay, again, as I said, this does not yet give a reason why Asarah b'Teves is B'Yetzem Yom Hazeh. I'll address that a little later. That is a good question, and we'll come to it. Yeah.
Maybe I'm mistaken. It seems to me I heard you can fast on Shabbat if you had a bad dream on Friday night.
Yeah. Yes, that's one exception, and I'll come back to that too. There is a rule that if a person had a frightening dream, and the halacha is, although many people don't do that today, that one is supposed to fast. Today we generally give tzedakah, but there is a law in the book, so to speak, that one fasts in order that Hashem should cancel a negative dream. So the halacha is a tainis chalom you are allowed to do, even on Shabbos itself, if you had a frightening dream Friday night. But the halacha is a little unusual here, that you then have to have another fast during the week as an atonement for the sin of fasting on Shabbos. I would just caution you, don't schedule the second fast on Shabbos, because then you're going to have to keep on going. So this is a strange idea, where on one hand you are allowed to fast on Shabbos for a Tanit Chalom, and at the other hand you still need a certain atonement for fasting on Shabbos. Now it's recorded that people remember the Chafetz Chaim. They remember a number of times. The Chafetz Chaim had many kind of prophetic dreams. The Chafetz Chaim was actually a big dreamer in that sense, and his dreams were meaningful dreams. And people remember times that the Chafetz Chaim did not eat on Shabbos, and he said it was because of a Tainit Chalom. Now, I don't want to get into all of that. Maybe we'll devote a share to it some other time. But Tainit Chalom is still something that can be practiced, but by and large, we don't necessarily encourage it that much, because for many of us, extra fast days make it difficult to daven, make it difficult to learn Torah. So spiritually, you might be losing more than you're gaining. So we encourage giving tzedakah. And one other possibility that's very interesting is something called a tanis dibor. Have you heard of a tanis dibor? That's where you don't talk that day. Now, for some people, they'll say, "Listen, I'll give up the food as long as I can talk," which is harder. But they say a tainis dibor is actually creates a greater kapara than a tainis even from food. Yeah, yeah. Hatavas Chalom is also a special prayer that you say. Some do it in front of 3 people at the Beis Din. I think the at least the newer Art Scroll Sitter has a ceremony. And in Chutz La'aretz, if you remember, during Birkas Kohanim, which is only recited in Chutz La'aretz, Ashkenazim, only during the Musaf of Yom Tov. So between the verses, Yevarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, there's a prayer, Ribono Shel Olam, asking Hashem to make my dreams into good dreams. However, that's said in Chutz La'aretz. The problem is that in Yerushalayim, actually not all of Eretz Yisrael, but in Yerushalayim and a lot of Eretz Yisrael, where Birkas Kohanim is recited every day, there's no spacing. There's no time to say the Ribono Shel Olam. So
you don't say it
no, you don't, because when the Kohanim are actually saying the brachos, you don't say anything.
I used to say it so
Are you talking about here and there?
Which means you're going to train more.
So no. So what they do? No, so what they do is what they taka do is that in the Musaf of Yom Tov in Eretz Israel, they do sing between the psukim. So you have the same chance to say the Ribono Shel Olam as somebody in Chutz La'aretz. That's the reason why. You'll notice that not everybody does that, but you'll notice that even in Yerushalayim, on the Musaf of Yomim Tovim, the Kohanim do sing, and that allows me to say the Ribono Shel Olam. So you don't gain the Ribono Shel Olam by daily duchening, but at least you don't lose them. You get to say it the same number of times that you would say it in Chutz La'aretz. Yeah.
What if someone took a neder to fast on the Yahrzeit of a parent? Can you repeat, please? And has done it already 3 times as a chazaka, and the 4th time it comes out on Shabbos. Now he's taken the neder.
Yeah.
As a chazaka.
Yeah. So the question would be that many people have a minhag to fast on the Yahrzeit of a parent. This is actually in the Gemara itself such a custom. And let's say a person mamish made a neder, or at least they've already done so 3 times in a row, which halachically turns it into a vow, and then the next Yahrzeit is on Shabbos. So would you fast on Shabbos if it is a Yahrzeit? So the halacha actually is yes, and the principle basically is that once you started a series of fasting, meaning if Shabbos would have been the first Yahrzeit, you would not. But once you established a pattern, then even if Shabbos comes in such a situation, you do fast. So that would be a second example of fasting on Shabbos. Okay. Yeah.
Yahrzeit of my father is on to be Shvat.
The Yahrzeit. Yeah.
So it's every year. So I was advised not to fast.
Yeah, that's correct. In other words, that's correct. In other words, if someone's Yahrzeit is on a day where you're not supposed to fast, every year, in other words, the Yahrzeit is Purim, the Yahrzeit is Chanukah, the Yahrzeit is even Tu B'Shvat. So in such a situation, you don't fast. But this is a different situation. This is a situation where it is a day that you do fast, except it happens to be on Shabbos. So there, the halacha is once you had begun the pattern, you continue it.
Nobody discusses the Rabbanan and the OUisrael with all of them?
Which about
The OUisrael Shabbos, the Rabbanan.
yeah. So the short answer is that the question is why would any fast ever override Shabbos except for Yom Kippur, given the fact that Shabbos is a Torah commandment and all of these fast days are rabbinic. So why would a Rabbanan override? So the truth of the matter is that the Isser of fasting on Shabbos is also technically rabbinic. It's from the prophets. It's derived from Yeshayahu. So it actually is not a Doraisa in that way. Now, I want to mention a kasha that people ask on Rav Chaim. Again, the over Rav Chaim's Yesod. Rav Chaim's Yesod is that if the fast is movable, you don't fast on Shabbos. If the fast is not movable, then you could fast on Shabbos. Asarah b'teves is not movable because of Etzem Yom Hazeh. Therefore, if you couldn't fast on Shabbos, you wouldn't observe it at all. Therefore, you can fast on Shabbos. Masha Enkein Tisha B'Av, which is a movable fast. So if I don't fast on Shabbos, I can fast on Sunday. It then becomes usher to fast on Shabbos. Now, here is the kasha. This is a kasha from a Gemara in Maseches Megillah. The Gemara in Megillah recounts a story about Rebbi. Rebbi, of course, is the moniker for Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who is the compiler of the Mishnah, one of the great tzaddikim as well. And it says, Rebbi decided one year to get rid of Tisha B'Av. He wanted to abolish the fast of the 9th of Av. So the Gemara says the following. The Gemara says, how could he do that? The 9th of Av. What do you mean? How could Rebbe did not live when Rebbe lived after the Bar Kokhba revolt? Things were not so great then either. It wasn't Mashiach. So the Gemara explains that the case was Tisha B'Av fell out on Shabbos that year, and it was Rebbe's position that if you're not gonna fast on the correct date, you shouldn't fast at all. In other words, unlike the halacha, we paskin Tisha B'Av is a movable fast. Rebbe said you have, as Rebbe made Tisha B'Av like Asarah b'Tevet. Rebbe took the position, the fast must be on the 9th of Av. We don't paskin like Rebbe, of course. And if the fast is not on the 9th of Av, therefore you don't observe it at all. Now, the question is, if you think about this, Rav Chaim's logic, in other words, what does the Gemara say? Since it's Shabbos and you can't fast on Shabbos, therefore you don't fast on Sunday. That's what the Gemara means, that Rebbe wanted to get rid of Tisha B'Av, that if you're not going to fast on Shabbos, then don't fast on Sunday. But like Rav Chaim, the opposite should have been the case. If you're not able to fast on Sunday, you should fast on Shabbos. Meaning, the Gemara seems to posit that not fasting on Shabbos is a given. So we paskin, if it falls out on Shabbos, fast on Sunday. Rebbe says no. If it falls out on Shabbos, you don't fast at all. But wait a second. Like Rav Chaim, the logic should be, if you're not going to fast on the wrong date, instead of saying you skipped Tisha B'Av that year, you should have said fast on Shabbos. So, Elamai, what do you see from the Gemara? You see from the Gemara that even when a fast is not a makeable up fast, such a word, you still don't fast on Shabbos. It's the opposite of Rav Chaim's logic of Asarah b'Tevet. You see? In other words, Rav Chaim wants to learn any fast that you can make up, you don't fast on Shabbos. Any fast you cannot make up, you do fast on Shabbos. According to Rebbe, which we don't paskin like, you cannot make up Tisha B'Av. If it's not going to be on the 9th of Av, you don't fast. But the Gemara says, therefore, there was no, he didn't want there to be a fast at all. Yeah, no, only when it fell on Shabbat. That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara explains that when it says Rav Yehuda Hanasi wanted to abolish Tisha B'Av, he meant he wanted to abolish when Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos. But like Rav Chaim, what should have happened was he should have said, you fast on Shabbos. So here we have a further addendum to Rav Chaim from the Or Sameach. Or Sameach was Rav Meir Simcha Kohen. My yeshiva Or Sameach is actually named after Rav Meir Simcha Kohen. He had no surviving children. He had one daughter who died in the lifetime of himself and the Rebbitzin. And Rav Meir Simcha was a tremendous gadol. Even Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, who himself was gadol ador, considered Rav Meir Simcha to be gadol ador. And Rav Meir Simcha adds the following glass to Rav Chaim. Tisha B'Av is very different than Asarah b'Tevet, primarily because it is a 24-hour fasting. So the Or Sameach wants to say the following. When you have a 24-hour fast on Shabbos, in which you're totally taking away Oneg Shabbos, then it's an absolute rule that you don't fast on Shabbos. So therefore, the makeup versus non-makeup is not going to be relevant for a 24-hour fast. Therefore, Tisha B'Av, which is a 24-hour fast, you will never fast on Shabbos no matter what. So we happen to paskin, it's a makeup day, so you do it on Sunday. But even Rebbe, who said you can't make it up, would still say you can't fast on Shabbos because it's 24 hours. As a result, Rebbe would say there would be no Tisha B'Av that year. Masha'enkein Asarah b'Teves, which is not a 24-hour fast, so even if you fast on Shabbos, you're not totally depriving yourself of pleasure because you can have a meal Friday night. So there we say, if it's a make-up fast, if it can make it up, you shouldn't fast on Shabbos even in the day. If you couldn't make it up, the Avudraham says you could. Which means the chiluk that Rav Chaim makes between a fast that you can make up and a fast you cannot make up is only going to be relevant on a partial day fast It's not going to be relevant on a 24-hour fast. This is so. If you combine the two together, so let's take something like Shivas or Batamas. In fact, this is Miyash of an interesting kasha, really gewaldic, because here's the thing. You know, of course, that the fast of the 17th of Tammuz is always the same day of the week as Tisha B'Av 3 weeks later. Now, if it was Rebbe's position that if Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, since you don't fast on Shabbos, you don't fast on Sunday, then he should have said the same thing by the 17th of Tammuz, that if you don't fast on Shabbos, you don't fast on Sunday. Why does the Gemara say it was only Tisha B'Av that he was canceling and not Shivas or B'Tammuz? The answer is, since Shivas or B'Tammuz is not a 24-hour fast, so even if Rebbe would not push it off to Sunday, he then would have allowed it to be done on Shabbos. Again, we don't paskin that either, because we paskin you can always make it up on Sunday. But his position is you can't. In other words, his position is you can't make up the fast days. So the question becomes: so for Tisha B'Av, that means you're not going to fast at all when it falls out on Shabbos. For Shivas or B'Tammuz, it means you're going to fast on Shabbos, just like Asarah B'Teves. And that's why the lashon of the Gemara that he wanted to get rid of Tisha B'Av only applies to Tisha B'Av. It does not apply to the 17th of Tammuz. Yeah. Started the what? No, that's in the Gemara itself. The Gemara itself, it's the Mishnah in Maseches Megillah that says Tisha B'Av Ma'achrin, that when Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, we push it off to Sunday. So the idea of a nitcha is brought down. By the way, yeah.
Are we only pushing off the fast or pushing off all the aspects of Tisha B'Av?
Everything.
Whether when Tisha B'Av falls on Shabbos, we're only pushing off the fasting itself and not the private partial mourning, or it's just that it happens.
No, we push off everything. We push off everything. All of the inuyim of Tisha B'Av are go to Sunday. The only thing is, some say that matters that are totally private, like Tashmish Hamita, which is forbidden on Tisha B'Av, you wouldn't do on Shabbos either. But anything that's public, you push it off to Sunday. Yeah. So this is a chiluk. So we're combining two variables here. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Let's say your Yahrzeit falls out right after the fast day on the 11th of Tevet. Can you fast? You're supposed to fast 2 days in a row?
Well,
I'm asking because it happens to be my Yahrzeit and I don't, but I think my son does.
Generally speaking,
Comes out on Shabbos.
Yeah, generally speaking, we do not encourage 2 consecutive fast days. If one feels they're able to do it, they can do it. But we would not consider that an obligation.
Especially this year, since it comes out on Shabbos.
Especially so. Yeah. But even if it's during the week, we would not encourage 2 fast days in a row. Now, it's interesting. On one hand, the Gemara itself records the minhag of fasting on a Yahrzeit. On the other hand, as you know, Hasidim in particular make a big thing. They bring schnapps and they bring herring and the like. Now, some do both. Sometimes the Baal Yahrzeit brings all sorts of stuff, and the Baal Yahrzeit fasts. He fasts, and he brings a lot of food for people to make brachos on le'iloi nishmasa. What did I hear once? Me'inyan, just free. I'm free associating here, but I once read an absolutely heartbreaking story about a man who was on his deathbed, and his family wanted him to see a rabbi, and he didn't want to see a rabbi. He says, I don't care about Judaism, I don't care about rabbis. And somehow, I think a Chabad Shaliach got into him, and the man told him a story. The man was in his 90s. The man said, 80 years ago, I lost my father. I had no father, I was just a kid. And I came to Shul to say Kaddish for my father's and his father's Yahrzeit. And after Shul, some guy went over to me and said, what type of kid are you? You didn't even bring a bottle of schnapps. You didn't bring any herring. And the kid came from a poor family. He literally, didn't have it. And he said he was so humiliated. He was so hurt. He says he ran out of shul. He went to his room. He sobbed the whole day. His mother can get him out. And he made a neder. He would never walk into a shul again. Ay, ay, ay. And he had not gone to shul, even on Yom Kippur, for whatever, 80 years. The beautiful ending, there's actually a beautiful ending of the story, that somehow the shaliach was able to reach him, and he made a reconciliation with Hashem before he died. But think about a story like that. Think about these words that we don't even think mean anything. How much they could hurt somebody, how much they could destroy somebody, and how much sensitivity we have to have. I mean, really, the kid said he sobbed and he made a neder he would never walk into shul.
What happens really
Again.
to it that a 10-year-old kid would come to shul with a bottle of schnapps? I mean,
What happens to the man who gave that kid that aside?
Listen, not so good. I don't want to. I don't wish bad on anyone, but yeah.
There's a simple story. A man
Yeah.
decided to walk into shul to see what Yahrzeit was like. He sat down. 3 people said, "You're sitting in my seat." He said, "I didn't walk into a shul for 30 years."
Yeah. It happens a lot. This thing about Makom Kavua, this is actually a big thing. I mean, I've been on the receiving end myself many times. Can't sit here, etc. And it leaves a very bad taste in the mouth. I know that some rabbis actually make announcements, not in yeshiva so much, but they make announcements that anyone who sits in your seat, you let them sit in your seat, and do not make any issue about it whatsoever. And I think that's largely a very, very wise answer, because okay, but things to think about. You know, it's true that davening in a makam kavua is a hidur. It's totally proper, but you got to think about bein adam lechavero in all of these things. You got to think about the pain, the embarrassment, the discomfort, and the truth of the matter is, whatever you're gaining by your hidur mitzvah of davening in a makam kavua, you're more than losing by the pain that you're causing other people. Come first. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Rabbi Salanter held that this was even true davening for the Yom. This is sometimes a source of fighting. Uh, let's assume that you have a Yahrzeit or whatever. Let's say 2 people have a Yahrzeit. And sometimes they fight over who should do it, or one is in Shloshim and one is a Yahrzeit or Yud Beis Chodesh or whatever it is. Rabbi Salanter said that if you want to bring an aliyat neshama to your mother, to your father, whatever it is, making shalom and avoiding machlokas is a much greater aliyat neshama than whatever you gain by davening for the Amud or saying Kaddish, if that's going to cause machlokas. So you always have to look at what will create the greatest amount of shalom. Because after all, why do you daven for the Amud? Why do you say Kaddish? Why do you do all of these things? It's not stam to be on show. It's because you want to do something that will elevate the neshama of the nifter. So how are you going to elevate the neshama of the nifter? Through bitterness and machlokas and animosity. So you give up, even if it's important to you. But if you see that the other person is going to get very, very upset, you be mavater on it. And that's very good. I think it's a very good rule of thumb for us to follow. Same thing with weddings, all sorts of things. Who should walk down the aisle? They asked Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky once. He says, "What's the proper minhag? Should the chassan be the 2 fathers and the kala the 2 mothers, or should it be mother, father, mother, father?" And they asked Rav Yaakov, "How did you do it?" So he said, 3 times one way and 3 times the other way. He says, whatever the Mechutanim wanted is what I did. I never made an issue over it. Again, that's important to think about how the Gedolim lived their lives. That all of the things that we fight over and we don't make all sorts of issues, all right, in the larger scheme of things, they're just not that important.
they don't daven well, or they don't know how to sing, but they say losing a parent makes you an orphan, not a chazan.
It's it's an interesting question. Some yeshivos actually have a rule that if a bachor is an avel, Rahman al he does not daven. He does not automatically daven for the yomad because maybe he can't daven so well or whatever it would be, and he says kaddish and the like. So some places do have such a rule that you have to be tested out.
A lot of the ballet tefillah, it just grated on my ears.
You're talking about even on Shabbos, even on Shabbos, because an avel doesn't daven on Shabbos.
No, whenever it was,
Even during the week.
no,
Okay.
with Shabbat, no, not an avel, but people who want
Oh,
to
just
daven,
generally people daven.
don't daven if you don't know how to daven.
Well, okay, that's yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. No, there's a blog that actually writes reviews of shows. And, I mean, they don't mention the name necessarily, but they talk about this week. The Chazan used this niggin for kedusha that was totally inappropriate. It kind of gives you a whole. It's a whole review of what's the right niggin, what's the wrong niggin, and this was a niggin that was beyond his voice register. He shouldn't have used it and the like. Okay, so now I just want to add one little hosafa to this, and a very interesting ha'ara of the Chassam Sofer. When push comes to shove, whatever the explanation is, we have to ask ourselves, why? Why is Asarah B'Tevet so chamor that there's an etzem hayom hazeh, that it's even docha Shabbos? So the Chassam Sofer brings in the idea that we already talked about, tainis chalom. He says, why are you allowed to have a tainis chalom on Shabbos? Why isn't that a violation of fasting on Shabbos? So here's what the Chassam Sofer says. The Chassam Sofer says there's a difference between fast days that commemorate past tragedies and fast days that are praying to Hashem to avert a future tragedy. We don't do mourning on Shabbos. So to mourn over the past, it's inappropriate to fast. So the 9th of Av is a fast of Avelos, a fast of mourning. Tevet and Tammuz is a fast of mourning. Tzom Galia is a fast of mourning. We don't mourn over the past on Shabbos. A tainis chalom is a prayer that the dream should not turn into something bad. Tanesim, which are prayers for the atid, are not nichlal in the prohibition of fasting on Shabbos because they're like tefillos. Now, what about the 10th of Teves? 10th of Teves seems to also be a fast about the past. So here's a tremendous chiddush of the Chassam Sofer, a real chiddush. The Chassam Sofer says that just like Rosh Hashanah is a Yom Hadin, God decides who will live and who will die. On Rosh Hashanah, there's at least a preliminary judgment called Kesiva. Yom Kippur, it is sealed. Of course, Hashem keeps on giving us delays here, right? Rosh Hashanah, it's written down. Yom Kippur, it is sealed. But Hashem keeps it in his desk. Hoshana Rabbah, he delivers it to the Malachim to carry out. And then it's brought down until Hanukkah, Hashem can still call back the Malachim. It's like the parent who says, I'm going to count to 5 and you better 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we're going to count to 10, whatever it is. So Baruch Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Erech HaPayim. So he does give us a lot of extensions. But just like Rosh Hashanah is Kesiva, Yom Kippur is Chasima, he says, Asarah B'Teves is a Yom Hadin. Hashem decides on the 10th day of Teves if the Beis Hamikdash is going to be rebuilt this year. So we fast on the 10th of Teves, says the Chassam Sofer, not to commemorate a tragedy, but like a tainis chalom, so that the tragedy of Galut should be averted and changed by Binyan Beit HaMikdash. This is called a Yom Din for Binyan Beit HaMikdash. And that is why, theoretically, it would even override Shabbos, because it falls under the category of Tanit Chalom. Now, that does mean that if we truly pray, perhaps we will merit that Hashem will decree that the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt this year. Now, once again, though, if God forbid we don't merit such a favorable decree, that doesn't mean all hope is lost. Just like on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, you can still pray that Gezeros should be ripped up, but it's a harder process. It's much harder to change a negative decree than it is not to get the negative decree in the first place. So this is a new significance for Asarah B'Teves, that it is a Yom Din Lebinyan Beis Hamikdash. Therefore, it is like a Tanis Chalam that you're allowed to do even on Shabbos because it's forward-looking. It is not just mourning over the past. And even though, as I say, the Avudraham's assertion is untestable because the calendar doesn't allow it, but the fact that we fast on Friday shows us there's Mashahu Miyuchad, there is something unique about this fast day. A final point about Asar B'Teves, I want to mention this. When we look at the fast days, we see that they're often rooted in some earlier great sin of Am Yisrael. So, for example, the fast of the 17th of Tammuz is rooted in the Chet HaEgel because Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Mount Sinai on Shavuos. He came down 40 days later, which is the 17th of Tammuz, if you calculate it. That's when he saw the Egel HaZahav, and he broke the luchos, smashed the luchos. So the root of the 17th of Tammuz as a day of tragedy lie in the Chet HaEgel. Tisha B'Av, the root of Tisha B'Av as a day of destruction and crying and weeping and mourning is rooted in the Chet of the Meraglim, because the Meraglim came back on the 8th of Av and they gave their report. How there are giants, we have no way of winning. And that night, the men were crying and weeping and sobbing and not believing in Hashem's promise. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Atem b'chisem b'chia shel chinam, you are crying a crying of naught, of no reason. This day will become b'chia l'dorot. So the root of the 17th of Tammuz is the Chet HaEgel, and the root of Tisha B'Av is the Chet of the Meraglim. By the way, as we know, the women did not sin in the Chet HaMeraglim. They had emunah, but still, they suffer along with all of us, meaning once Tisha B'Av became a day of Churban, so women mourn as well, right? They mourn over the mistakes their husbands made, whatever, even though, Baruch Hashem, they did not make those, we're not guilty of those mistakes. So some Galia, as far as I know, I'm not aware of any root of some Galia, but Asarah B'Teves is very interesting. Rav Shlomo Fisher, Zechrono Livracha, great Talmid Chacham, not necessarily so well known, but a phenomenal guy, brings from Sfarim, although it's not in Chazal, so it's hard to know where these Sfarim got it from, that Asarah B'Teves commemorates Mechiras Yosef, that there was a Messiah, that Yosef was sold by his brothers on the 10th of Teves. So it turns out that at least 3 of the 4 fast days are rooted in primeval Averos at our inception as a nation. Asarah B'Teves, Mechiras Yosef. Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the Chet HaEgel.
And they all were done by the men.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Yeah. Well, as I say, the ultimate curse of Chava may be that you're on the receiving end of all the mistakes that men make. Say again? Oh, okay, yeah, okay, you're right. So we can blame women for that one, the first one. On the other hand, maybe I shouldn't make a declaration against my male interest. Many say that the only reason Chava made a mistake, the Gemara says, is because Adam Harishon told her, "Don't touch the tree." The Nachash pushes her, nothing happens. Had Adam been honest with her and he told her the truth, she wouldn't have eaten, right? So the Chet Eitzadas is actually Adam's fault in not being honest with Chava. So even that, etc. Okay, so okay. Lashon. Oh, I see. That's interesting. Maybe Chet of Beit Sadas is going to get some Galia. I hear. So that's kind of the most basic of all. It's interesting. You wouldn't look at some Gedalia as the most basic.
Because
Uh,
he was
he
killed
was
on Rosh
killed on,
Hashanah.
which was the day of Adam Rishon. Right. Yeah. Okay. So we'll stop here. Be'ezus Hashem. Just as we wish for Rosh Hashanah a kesiva v'chasima tova, so based on this thought, we should also have a kesiva v'chasima tova for Binyan Beis Hamikdash. And once again, knowing that this is the anniversary of the Chet of Mechiras Yosef, should once again make us ponder sinas chinam. That is the reason for the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. And until we overcome that sinas chinam, we will not be zocha to its redemption. So have a good fest.